This is the New Thought and World Religion class. My name's Wendy Fredrickson, and this is my first time. A little scary. But today I am talking on the book, The 13 Commandments by Saint-Paulson. And I was really surprised when I told people what I was going to do, how many people did not know who Saint-Paulson was. And I thought he was kind of like Eric Butterworth, the same kind of guy. And so I'll tell you, Saint-Paulson was born in 1915. And after a successful business career at the age of 44, he was inspired to become a Unity minister. And he was a Unity minister in New York for many years until he was finally called to Unity Village to serve there. And he served as the minister of Unity Village Chapel for 16 years. He was the head of the Unity School of Christianity for many years. He traveled the world for Unity, spreading unity and speaking. He led numerous Unity retreats around the world. He served as vice president of the International New Thought Alliance as an executive. And he was a best-selling New Thought author, and his wife Jane was also a dedicated Unity minister that served with him in many of those posts. And he died in 1998 at the age of 82, and he was cremated, and his ashes were sprinkled on the Unity Rose Garden. And so he has many wonderful books, although when I went to look for any writing about him online, there was very little. There was very little about him, but what I wanted to do first was just to read a little bit out of the foreword. He's telling you what this is, what this book is about. And he said, the book is a prayerful study of the 13 commandments. Now, I took the 13 and came up with a 14th, so in this you're going to get one of mine. But he says it's all a prayerful study of the 13 commandments, and that will reveal the spiritual unfoldment of mankind from the concept of many gods to that of one God, resident in man, whose nature is love, and the God-inspired development of the individual from reliance on outer and mental laws to the fulfillment of self through love, and then the discipleship and expression of the universal Christ. Let the words of this book serve as guideposts to your own experience with the 13 commandments. Read with an open mind and a receptive heart, so that the Spirit of truth may unseal the spring of inspiration within you. In this spiritually sensitive age, your revelation and experience will bring light and uplift to all other truth seekers. God is blessing you right now. Saint-Paulson. One of the things because there are 14 of them, and I have 2 weeks to do it in. What I'm going to do is first give you the information, and then we'll open up to discussion after that, because there's a lot of information here. So, the 10 Commandments, when Moses went up into the mountain, he had led the children of Israel out of Egypt, the bondage of Egypt, and he went up into the mountain to get God's word of how to live. And when he left, the people melted down their gold and everything and created a golden calf to worship. And so he brought that, whether this is a true story, whether it's a myth for people, no matter what it is, if you think about it, when we are in bondage to this world, and then we come to some idea or some person that leads us out of that bondage, we have an opportunity at that time so I see Moses going up and getting the 10 Commandments and coming down, and then seeing that the people had chosen bondage of some form again. Bondage to the physical world. And that's kind of what we do sometimes. We get a new idea, we get something, and then we take that idea back into bondage again. And when that happens, then we're kind of governed by, so Moses breaks the first 10 that he comes, and he goes back and gets another 10. And we're kind of similar when we get this new idea of truth, and then we take it back into the bondage, and then we're back living under the rules, the thou shalt nots, the same rules that, Moses had to go out and get for the children of Israel. But the way I see J. Saint-Paulson, now he doesn't say this, the way I see his is that it's kind of like what he teaches in here are those original 10 commandments, 10 that Moses brought down. Those ideas that people in bondage who want to no longer live in bondage, if they live by these ideas, they will no longer live in bondage. And that's what I love about this. And so I want you to begin with, any of us who are not living our full potential are somehow still living in bondage. And so I want you at this time, while we read these ideas, to just allow yourself to wonder, what if these ideas were true? What if we were open to practicing these ideas, to living these ideas, to letting them be the guide that directs us in our life? What would our lives be like? And and I'm going to call it the 14 commandments. And what we're doing is, Saint-Paulson turns them from commandments. Again, this is my idea, not his, but turns them from commandments into the 14 God-Consciousness principles. And so in the very first one, every single one of them are based on the first commandment or first God-conscious principle. And this is not a theory, it's a principle and a promise, this first commandment. So the commandment is, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no other God before me. And it is saying there is only one perfect, all-powerful, all-knowing, ever-present God whose will is good for all and whose spirit is present in and as every person, every heart, every mind, everything. It's in everything. And then it talks about, if we're going to accept that, we have to release the need for false gods. And Paulson talks about 5 or 6 different false gods. One is the false god of evil. It sees evil as anything that we believe that can thwart the truth about God. A belief in that, a belief that there's something. Some kind of evils we call the devil, that, Satan, we have those big ones. But it's just any idea of evil in our life. And so we have to let go of that one. The God of division, the idea that God works evil, works in some way that is less than good to bring about things in our life, to bring, as if, it's like that God will test and try us or punish us or hurt us in some way in order to get our good to us. And we have to let go of that idea, that false god. The other is the false god of appearance. And that's the false god of looking into this manifest world and believing that this manifest world holds any power. This manifest world is merely an effect of past thought. And there's no power at all in it. And the fourth false god is the god of suggestion. Belief that there are psychological collective or individual energies that can thwart God or good. Number 5 is the God of the divided universe. So many times, and I've said it myself, I talk about the idea of reality and illusion. And what Paulson says is you've got to let go of that idea. There is no reality of illusion. There is only reality. And that reality is God the good. And then the last false god that he speaks of is the God of the little self. The belief or concept that within each of us is somehow a psyche or an ego, or that somehow we are against. There's something in our minds or our thoughts or our hearts that are against God or against our true nature or against good. So he's saying you need to begin to look at those things in your life and begin to call them exactly what they are, a false god. And one of the things that he talks about, all of these are evil, and particularly with evil, is it says, what if somebody says, what about the evil? And he says, we stop rationalizing it, we stop explaining it, we stop justifying it, we stop giving the false gods our attention. Instead, we go back to the God-Consciousness idea. There is one perfect, all-knowing, ever-present God whose will is good for all and whose spirit is present in every heart and mind and as every heart and mind. So when we come up against any one of those false gods or those ideas, he would say, you take it back to the principle. If this principle is true, is this true? Does this have any meaning? Does this have any meaning in my life? Do I give it any credence? And he would say, no. So then he takes the next, again, I'm going to go through these quickly and then we'll discuss afterward. Then he takes commandment number 2, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. So he says, that means that we are to entertain no false concepts of the nature of God. If there is only one God, all good, all powerful, all wisdom, all strength, all love, all life, and all joy, any concept that is different than that is a false God, is a graven image. And this applies to the whole universe and to each of us and to our true nature as the Spirit of God. And so he gave us some examples of making a graven image. So one of them was in a church, so I'm going to talk about that or in that. And it's when we worship or we serve or in any institution, any kind of a place, when we begin to hold the institution or the place as the purpose, and that's what we give our energy to, rather than it's these principles behind it. When we begin to serve an institution and serve any kind of a social thing, and that includes our family, when we serve the structure of the family above the nature of God within the family, then we're making a graven image. And when we try to, and another one he said was when we try to make God a means to an end. So when we're praying to or believing in or deifying objects or places or people, and when we start to believe that the source of God or of good can be found outside of yourself, and that you've got to find the right group, the right place, and then, or any action that we take to try to make good happen in the world from a perspective that it's not there, you start to make graven images. That's another way. And number 3 is when we begin explaining, worrying, or justifying the negative outcome that will befall us if we refuse to do something, take some action, stop something, face something in the world that we determine is wrong. Because he would say, if you are you're looking at a graven image there. Because, again, we go back to the first commandment. There is only God, there is only good. And that's our true nature, and that's everybody's nature, and that's what we look for in the world. That's what we perpetuate in the world. If we do the opposite of it, we're making a graven image. So the God consciousness for the second commandment, when we move it into God consciousness, we say there is one power for good at work in all of life. This spirit for good resides in everyone as our true nature. We faithfully accept this truth that God is the integrity of our soul, and we let that Spirit of God, that Spirit of good within us, express itself through all of our thoughts, feelings, words, actions, and in our everyday responses to life. So number 3, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And this is not saying that to not speak frivolously of God, the name God, or to not use the name God to cuss. It's not saying anything like that. Remember when Moses asked God in the burning bush and he asked the name of God in the burning bush? The answer was, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever. This is my memorial unto all generations. And so when it's saying not to take it in vain, it's saying, remember, when it's saying God is everywhere, God is all good, God is all powerful, and if God is everywhere, then God has to be as much in each of us as anywhere else. A part of us, who we are, our very nature. And so here it's saying that every time that we think, feel, or say, I am, you are, he is, she is, they are, we are, it is, whenever we're sending out a proclamation, whenever we're claiming something in our hearts and minds, we are taking the name of God and wielding that creative power. And because God is the spirit of absolute love and absolute goodness, God is the expression of life, God is the instrument of divine mind and consciousness, and God's spirit resides in the temple that is you and me and everything. When we proclaim, I am, and he is, and all of those. When we proclaim that through our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, the whole of creation springs to attention to perform that work. So why would we use this creative power to manifest anything or any experience that defies the truth of our nature and our desire for goodness and God's presence in our lives? So the third God consciousness that comes out of that commandment, remember, when you want to move into God's consciousness and follow this, the third commandment, the consciousness says, I consciously accept and practice the great eternal creative privilege of the name of God. I am. To bring forth into manifestation only good, only the true nature of God in myself, in others, and in all of creation. So then we go to number 4. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So Paulson says we are always worshiping with our own mind and our own body temple. And that we not only can, but we do this in every setting at every time. And so as we consciously choose to bless this connection and we rejoice then we begin to rejoice in every opportunity to remember who and whose we are. And that's our Sabbath day, are those moments that we remember who and whose we are. And it says, eternal settings and rituals and words are only of value if they support our true purpose. to realize, recognize, and feel the nature and the Spirit of God and God's good that lives within us and within everything. And so when we quiet our mind and our hearts to listen, that's what we're listening for. That's what we're listening and looking for within us, a remembrance of who we are. And it says, in that time, we need to even set aside all efforting, even the efforts to study truth, the efforts to think positively, the efforts to lift our consciousness or change our attitudes, because we're going into a place where we accept, I already am. I already am. God already is. Everything already is. My good is already here. And we spend our time and the seventh day, it's kind of talking about the relationship is you would hopefully want to at least spend a seventh of your time in going back into that knowledge. And so the God consciousness that comes out of the commandment about the Sabbath day is, in the holy stillness, the holy Sabbath, I relax and know that God is mighty in the midst of me. God is the reality of my own being, and God's good is my true self. Now we get to number 5. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long in the land which Jehovah thy God giveth thee. So Sig says that we form relationships here. And one of our very first relationships, one of our relationships in which we kind of define ourselves, is that with our parents. But he would say that our relationship with our parents really is no different than any relationship. We need to look at it that way. And the first thing was we go right back to the very first God consciousness, and that is the true nature of God and the true nature of everyone. And that is that everyone is divine, everyone is free, everyone is a spiritual being. And that the Spirit of God and the Spirit of good is their real self, their real nature. And so as we begin to look at all of our relationships, and especially with just that when we look back at our parents, at our family, at all of those that we sometimes tend to have a lot of issues with, we begin to see them as the expression of God and God's good, and that they are also gifted with the rights and privileges that come with that nature. And we release everyone from any memory, from any experience, or any idea of separation that does not agree with that first commandment. So the fifth God consciousness would be, I honor everyone by recognizing that they are the Spirit of God, of good, coming into ever greater and more wonderful expression. I free my mind to see everyone following the guidance of their own spirit. In this consciousness, my days are long in the land which God hath given me. Okay, so now to number 6. Thou shalt not kill. And from this greater understanding, Saint-Paulson says, we see that this means more than just harming a physical body. It means that we will not harm others inch by inch by killing another person's faith in God, by killing their happiness, by killing their understanding, their capacity to love, their well-being, their feelings about themselves, all of that, anything that fits that idea. All of this killing, we think it's done with the words we say and the actions that we think. But the truth is where it begins in our thoughts and our attitudes. And that's where we need to address it the most. It is done when we see anyone as less than the true nature of God and of good, which is their everlasting birthright. Our negative thoughts and feelings toward another only come because instead of remembering that God is the source of all of our good or all of their good, we begin to believe that another can control us or take something from us or affect our lives in a negative way. It's the only reason that we choose to do any of those things, to do that harm. And all of that begins in our own minds and our own thoughts and our own attitudes. So the commandment, the God-Consciousness that comes from that commandment is all power comes from God and works for my good. Therefore, it is pointless to employ negative emotion, reasoning, or action to protect myself from anything or anyone. I support the life in myself and all others by looking for our true nature in every aspect of our lives. And number 7, the last one we're going to do today, we'll get the other 7 next week, is thou shalt not commit adultery. And everybody thinks of thou shalt not commit adultery as being a sexual sin that a husband or wife commit against one another. But Saint-Paulson says that that's really not what it means at all. And that the idea behind that is that one person makes a commitment and then they break that commitment to themselves and to another. And what he says is that is true in all of our life, in every aspect of our life. And the commitment that we truly have made is to remember who we are and whose we are, and that there's one perfect, all-knowing, ever-present God whose will is good for all and whose spirit is ever present. And when we think or do anything less than that, we are committing adultery. We are adulterating the truth in our lives. And the thing is we are the only ones that can experience loss because of that. We don't get the fullness. We're keeping the fullness of that truth from ourselves. So the God consciousness of that would be, I choose to acknowledge and express the fullness of God's goodness in every aspect of my life. So as I've been studying this the last 3 weeks, I guess, thinking and preparing for this, and I actually I read this book for the first time about 20 years ago. And then in 2008, I was reading it and studying it again, and wrote just condensed ideas from each chapter, from each commandment, and actually drew pictures. That's one of the ways that I integrate ideas within myself. And so these are ideas that we bring back to ourselves. It can take some time, and that's okay, and it doesn't have to either. It can happen instantly. But so this time, as I've been studying it, I had a dream, and in my dream I was learning how to become a sorcerer. And in my dream, there were good sorcerers and there were bad sorcerers and everything. And I was in this huge house where all the good sorcerers lived, and there was a master there with us. And we were given the power. We were told that we were given the power and would be given more power and everything. But we were not given any direction on how to become sorcerers. So we just had to kind of look at each other and look at what we were doing and just be aware and then try things. Well, I really early on recognized that if the bad sorcerers knew where we were, there was going to be problems. There was going to, So I decided to use my magic to try to find a way to put protection around this house so that we would be protected from the bad sorcerers. And I worked and worked and worked to figure out how to, I didn't know whether to lock the windows, to block the windows, to, make something that if you touched it and you weren't a good sorcerer, you'd die, or, I came up with all kinds of ideas. I have very convoluted, long dreams, guys. And finally, I had spent so much time on this that I finally sat down one day and I said, if I spend any more time on this, I am never going to learn how to be a sorcerer, because I'm wasting all of my time trying to protect us instead of learning how to do what I need to do. And in that moment, the master sorcerer came to me and he said, you are now a master sorcerer. And then the dream went on about learning how to do that. But it's kind of the same thing for all of us. When we begin to turn our energy to master the truth of who we are, rather than to protect ourselves from that which means nothing and has no purpose, really, then we can begin to master and begin the journey of owning ourselves as the master that we've always been. So it's a lot of information, a lot to give you really fast, and so I'd like to kind of open up now to questions, conversation, anything about your experiences in your journey to become that master, maybe things that have worked for you, or just thoughts, what you feel and think about what we've talked about.
Along this same line, my television in my living room, the sound wasn't real great on it, so I discovered I could took my amplifier from my stereo and run it through my television and get a nice sound out of it. So last night I put in a Marcia Stevens video. She's a contemporary songwriter, singer, gospel music singer for the gay and lesbian community.
Uh-huh.
And one of the phrases she said in the video was, this woman come to her and she said she was totally confused that she wasn't a Christian, but she said, everything that you preach the truth, you almost want me to become a lesbian. And Marcia said, I don't have any say-so or will for you to become a lesbian. All I want you to do is live your life for God the best way you know how. So I thought that was amazing that this lady she would tell about this lady's story.
Right. And that sounds like a response coming from this first commandments, that her response was a response to that.
So I understand that you're saying that what you're presenting here this morning is probably closer to what Moses brought down the first time compared to what we have in our literature today. Is that correct?
That's what I think. Again, that's not in his book, but I just kind of thought about that the first time I read it. Those were the broken tablets. And I think that in some ways, I know in my own life that truth has come to me, and sometimes I've had the truth and I've had that, and there's sometimes when I've broken it and I've picked back up the golden calf, and started doing that again. And then it would get to where it would not work and not work and not work. And I finally go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. And then I pick up the truth again and start practicing it, and life begins to work again. And have done it several times. So, and each time I get a little bit more. I understand a little bit more. I live a little bit more.
So first I want to say thank you so much for doing this. I love this. And
That microphone is
yeah, it's kind of up and down,
really
isn't it?
distorted. Yeah.
So, and I'm, as I shared with you, this sounded really weird.
It is. It's extremely distorted. Could you take this one? I don't know. It's very distorted.
Let me see if this one works. I'm wondering if it's because we're back that far.
But, yeah, I wouldn't trade it. I just.
Yeah, just
Hello? Is
Oh,
that
that's
any
better.
better?
That's better.
It's.
A little bit.
Better
Not,
signal.
it's still kind of weird.
Weird.
Yeah.
It is.
I'd rather hear from you more right now than me, because you're.
Can you get that, Wendy?
Yes.
I can pull it.
And it can pop out, yeah.
Oh.
There we go.
First, I just thank you so much for doing this. I feel weird being up here to say this, but thank you for doing this, because I think it's always so good for us to have these reminders and to learn about what these commandments really are. And as I shared with you, if I don't get out right away in the morning, I listen on my way in, so I was listening on my way in. And again, how the universe works today, I'm going back to basics, and so I'm talking about God the good. And as you're sharing this all about God and what God is and the nature of God, and I'm just so grateful that you're sharing it again, because I don't know about you guys, but I need to be reminded of this stuff all the time. And I love when you just said, when you read something or when you hear something, and it's almost like these layers come off. That's what I feel. Paula and I spent probably about an hour at least last night just talking about spiritual things and sharing ideas and things that we've learned along the way, and in that, I always learn from him. I always learn something from him that shifts me inside, that reminds me, because it really is a lifelong journey, and I'm grateful that I have my whole life plus to figure this stuff out, because I don't know about you guys, but I go into my humanness pretty easily. And to be reminded again, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this, Wendy. This is powerful stuff.
So before I hand it to Elby, I'm just going to give you, Sue, a little way of looking at it, that they would, using what they practice here. To say I go into my humanness is to believe in the false God of the little self. I have no humanness within me. That is not the full presence of God and the love of God and the perfection of God. And I've just been doing this all week. How many times I say something that applies as a false God, and to begin to start recognizing that when it happens to myself.
We're still in yesterday. The thing that popped out at me is when you were talking about the fourth, you said set aside effort. And to me, practice is effort. And so how do you set aside effort and still work the principles? And, the only thing that comes to me is you just have to let go of thought. Because that's the only way that you can set aside effort, is if you're so in the now that you don't have any thought. Because otherwise you're working on it. I don't know. I'm looking for ideas, because it just keeps coming up for me.
Well, I can talk pretty loud, and
I'm gonna go ahead.
But it's
and
on
start
this
recorder.
remember that when it's saying set aside effort, it's talking about remembering the Sabbath day. So it's not saying don't ever do that. It's saying that in that about 1/7 of your life that you spend time, you need to spend some time where you go into a place where you're not doing that at all. Because it's not saying don't live your life, don't do things, don't go out into the world and create things and think of things. It's just saying that you need that time of remembrance of who you are, not trying to become who you are, but being who you are.
For me, it's having a presence of mindfulness. It's not something that comes and goes. It's not something that maybe I'll meditate for an hour, maybe I'll do this, whatever. It's a constant sense of awareness. And I think awareness is the key because it awakens us to our eternal self. And I think that's the key. So it's just it's your presence. It's how you are, who you are, and how you live.
There was someone else that had a hand up.
It's already been said.
Oh, Don.
It's already been said.
Oh, it's already been said, okay.
You brought.
Here, let me go ahead and pass. Go ahead and answer, Wendy.
Just for those who are here, I did bring the pictures that I drew for each of the commandments. If you're interested, they're up here if you'd like to look at them later. But
Let's display them.
During this past few weeks, as I've really, in preparing for this lesson, what it's done for me is it's brought me into a consciousness where I've been keeping the Sabbath. Because I've been paying attention to this. I've been thinking about it. When I'm preparing for something, it becomes, I do it all the time. I'm listening to it in my own head. I'm talking about it. So I find myself going to places and, like walking in a store. And initially, Don and I were there, and I started talking about why this store wasn't working. And I could just feel in myself that little, and you can feel that comes. And I was like, wait a minute, is what I'm saying, is this true? If I believe that first God consciousness, can this that I'm talking about, this store, be true? And remember, the God consciousness, the idea of that is not an idea that says, look into the world of appearance. Remember, that's one of the false gods. Look into the world of appearance and tell us what you see. It's saying, there is no world of appearance. Stop it. There is only good. There is only God. So it's the conversation that I am having about this store supporting that idea? Or am I supporting the idea of a false God? And instantly, I wasn't interested in that conversation anymore. And instantly, I started looking at this store for what I could see of good in it and the people that were there. And my experience, instead of being one of, why am I even shopping here, was one of, oh my gosh, there's so much beauty here. There's so much goodness here. I have a purse, because I'm able to do this in my abundant stuff. I have a purse full of money. I can buy anything I want here. And I just went into that place of, and I'm standing behind this man I love who is the expression of God so fully in my life. And I was just in awe of that moment and that world that I was in. And it was amazing, the difference. Just by recognizing and going, nope, can't be true.
Why don't you show off your pictures and tell them about them? Let's see.
Think about the number one first. Yeah.
So,
Is that 7?
Well,
is that so I'm at the end? Wrong end?
Well, I don't know if anybody can even see them from here, but it's just when one of the ways that you can integrate these ideas and that, and for those of us particularly who are very visual, is I just drew a picture. I sat down and kind of went, what would it look like? What would the first God consciousness look like to me? So that was it.
Almost
That's
like the
number
flame.
one.
Yeah,
Like a lotus.
the flame
Yeah.
in the burning
But it looks
bush.
like lotus leaves with a flame.
And then number two, remember this is not to have, let's see, where are we on number two? No graven image. And number three, not taking the name of the Lord God in vain. Although this is just more taking the name of God at face value. When I speak it, it is. I'm going to take it seriously.
Down a little.
Then this was the Sabbath day and keeping it holy. And honoring your mother and father. I wanted to express that our connection, one of the things, I don't know who it says that nobody has any grandparents, because every one of us, our parent is God. And that connection is true for everybody. And then thou shalt not kill. I just wanted to express be upholding one another and supporting one another in that. And then this was thou shalt not commit adultery. Just staying pure and true and whole. So, any more questions or comments here? Okay, so well, I'm gonna take just a little bit for then. One of the things that we're doing right now in Unity of Springfield is we're doing a cold weather. A place for people who right now are living on the streets, and a place for them to come in and be warm. And I've been thinking about this, not just since I've been studying this, but I've been thinking it as we've been planning this place and working with this place. And I've also, prior to this, my thoughts about the people in this world that the concept of helping somebody, the concept of help and helping somebody. Because if you take it to this commandment, this God-Consciousness, there is only good in the world. There is only good everywhere. Everybody has this power. Everybody has access to it all the time. And we don't want to see anybody less than that. We want to see everybody as whole and strong and powerful and well. And so I've been looking at my own life and in these relationships with people in the world. And how do we apply that to something like that? I mean, if I choose to look from the false god of appearance, and I choose to give my attention and my belief into the false god of appearance, I would start to say, oh my gosh, this is awful. There's suffering, there's pain, there's hurt. Somebody needs to do something about it. And then I start to find those people who aren't doing something about it, and I start to find something wrong with them. And then I start to find the organizations that aren't doing something about it, or might even be doing the opposite and causing more harm. And it's just this huge convoluted mess that it either makes me want to stand up and fight somebody, or it makes me want to go hide in my little cave and go, I just can't, it's too big. It's too big. However, if I take these principles, this is what I've done, and I've been doing it for a few years now, stuff. So when I come up against somebody who come into a situation where there's somebody that's standing on the side of the road asking for something, okay. The first and most important thing for me to do is if my head is starting to go, oh, poor them, oh, blah, blah, whatever, that I just have to go, stop it. Stop it. That is not who they are. And if that's the only way that you can see them, that you have nothing to give them in this life or in it, you just need to leave them alone because you're not adding anything good. So I have to first and foremost in my mind, and I do this most of the time, if I get in the car where I'm going out, I go, okay, I'm going out into this world of people, and who are they? Who are they? Am I going to remember that? Who are they? Who are they? And now, the next thing I remember, which we didn't talk about in this, but it's a principle in Unity that we live in the flow. And I'm just going, I am just a part of the flow. That's what I'm doing. That's what I want to do. That's how I want to interact with these individuals, with anybody that I meet. And I am just open to the flow. And that means I am open to give and I am open to receive. Not because there's need, not because there's lack, but because there's abundance for all of us. But because anybody that's asking for something from God, it's readily available. And I am just a part of that whole process. And anything that I want. So, and it goes both ways. So like one day I got into that consciousness and I went to the Brentwood Library and there was a man sitting out. And I don't just wait for somebody to stand on the side of the road saying, do you need, with the sign. And I never read the sign because that takes me off that. But there was a man and he was sitting on the picnic table there. And obviously from the way he was dressed and stuff, he seemed to be one of those individuals that I keep a stack of $5 bills that was ready for that gift of the flow. And so I handed that to him. And when I handed that to him, he took my hand and he said, I am here to give you a blessing. I am here to give you a blessing from God. He said, I knew that you would come to me. And we just stood there holding hands, looking into each other's eyes and loving each other totally and completely. So I just want you to know that in you applying this principle, when you go out into the world and you use it first and you put it first, amazing things can happen. And when you begin to practice this, I practice it while I'm standing in line, and I was practicing it one day in line. And one of the things I say in order to practice this is when I'm standing in line and I feel myself getting even a little bit anxious or, any of that stuff, I'll stand there and I just say to myself over and over, the place where I now stand is a very good place. Heaven exists here in this moment and right now, and I am surrounded by God in this moment. And there was this huge man, he must have weighed about 400 pounds and was like 6'6" before me in line. It was at the secondhand blind store. And his house had burned and he was checking to make sure the voucher for stuff was going to work. And he kept talking and kept talking and kept talking. And finally he turned to me and he said, I'm sorry I'm taking so long, I'm sorry I'm taking so long. And I just looked at him and I said, the place where I now stand is a very good place. Heaven is here now and I stand before the presence of God. And he looked at me and he got tears in his eyes and he said, can I touch your face? And I said, yes. And he reached down and he touched my face and I reached up and I touched his face. And we just stood mesmerized in love with each other. And because I claimed the presence of heaven now in this moment, It shows up. And it's so amazing, guys. And I offer you an opportunity to have these amazing, amazing moments more and more often. And my belief is that as we all continue to do this, they won't be odd occurrences. They'll begin to be the world we live in. And that's the promise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. That was absolutely beautiful. Would you like to read the announcements, or do you want me to?
You ahead.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say we do have our we do have our basket on the back table there, and I just want to encourage all of you to please give. Please give. Please give. I'm going to go ahead and read the announcements. Should you be in question regarding activities here in the inclement weather, please go to our Facebook community page, our Facebook page, or our website for notification. If school is canceled, activities at the church are also canceled, with the exception of the shelter. And that means the shelter that we do on a nightly basis. Part 2 of Wendy Fredrickson presentation on Saint-Paulson's book, 13 Commandments, will take place at next week's New Thought World Religions class at 9:15. That's what we're here at now. And I look forward to that because absolutely, Wendy, this was phenomenal. Thank you. The mat weaving continues on Thursdays from 12:30 to 2:30. The LGBTQIA and Allies group will be meeting on January 16th at 6 p.m. The Reverend Pat McClellan will continue the book study, Walking the Bridgeless Canyon. The annual meeting. It's immediately after Sunday service on January 30th, and I encourage all of us to show up for that so that we can help participate and we can be that active part of who we are. We elect 3 board members every year. If you have been a member of the church for 1 year and would like to run for the board, application forms are available in the office. The flower donation lists are on the bulletin board. And that's to the left of the sanctuary. You may sign up for a Sunday that appeals to you. Please include your name and phone number and what you would like your dedication to say. You then pay the church $50, and I would take it and give that to Brandy or to Dee, and we order the flowers for you. And then, last of all, please join Lisa on January 23rd, and I'm sure going to be there following service for the first organizational meeting of this year's Planet Unity Earth Day. And I haven't heard that for a long time, so I'm so excited about that. This is actually a lot of things to us. It's first of all, it's our biggest fundraiser. And second of all, we really connect with the community through Planet Unity. And we align with Earth Day. A lot of the principles of Earth Day are the principles of unity too. And so we can kind of combine those and put ourselves out in the community, and we can also help the funding for this church. So with that, I'm going to ask...
Let me just
go ahead.
say one more thing really quick. You know, when I talked about the flow, and then Paul talks about giving, Dawn and I, when we first started, we chose to just give $20 a week. It was the consciousness that we had, but we did it, and we did it openly, and we did it freely. And then each year it's just increased and increased. We're way over 10%. We give all the time, but we also opened up to receiving, and we receive all the time. And I am just a testament that when you get into that flow of giving and receiving openly, there is no limit to it. And I think sometimes money just appears out of nowhere for us because it comes and comes and comes. So give yourself an opportunity to be part of that, guys. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Wendy. I'm gonna close with that. We're gonna be getting in a circle. I think Randy's probably gonna squirt our hands with a little juice. We can hold hands. Thank you so much, Wendy.